Hello, my name is Ripley. Welcome to the video.
What's up, schmucks? How you doing? Good, I hope. Before we get going, let me tell you about today's sponsor, the G-Words Podcast. It's not really a sponsor, but I have to plug it somewhere. The G-Words Podcast is the podcast I do with my YouTuber friends, where we talk about all kinds of things, like this.
What vegetable would you pick for a fight against a 10-year-old?
Wait, am I beating the 10-year-old with this vegetable?
Yeah.
Oh, fuck, that's a good question. Okay,
What's your weapon?
It would have to be something firm, because I want to be able to use it like a blunt weapon. I can just bat him in the head with it.
That's so fucked up.
Apparently a pumpkin is a vegetable. I'm gonna take a big-ass pumpkin and just slam him over the head with it.
Bro, I'm gonna just get a bunch of... Alright, I'm gonna just use a fucking yam.
A yam?
Just throw a yam at his head and dip.
No, I'm using the pumpkin. I'm bashing that pumpkin over his little 10-year-old head. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's get right on into this. Last year, Disney launched its pretty garbage streaming service, Disney+. The service launched with Disney's back catalog of animated movies, Pixar movies, Disney Channel shows, MCU movies, but it also flaunted its flagship title and the first of very few original series, The Mandalorian. The Mandalorian, for those who somehow don't know, is a Western-esque story within the Star Wars universe. It tells the story of a gunslinging bounty hunter, part of the creed of Mandalorians. This Mandalorian comes across a child that he is instructed to take to his employer, but he refuses, and instead goes on the run with this child, while some of the best assassins and bounty hunters in the galaxy hunt them down. Yeah, if the show was actually about that for 8 episodes, it would probably be pretty good. Unfortunately, it's not, and that's why we're here today. So, judging by what I just said, and judging by the title, you can probably guess how I feel about this show. With Season 2 of The Mandalorian right around the corner, I figured now is a better time than ever to talk about Season 1's shortcomings and how Season 2 can improve upon something everyone except me seems to love, which is always the case. So what we're going to do is we're going to go episode by episode and analyze each episode while we unearth this season's story structuring flaws. I am so excited. Our story begins with our protagonist on the hunt. Mando enters this bar where he's harassed but quickly dispatched of these thugs, which is a great way of highlighting that our protagonist is an effective bounty hunter, showing opposed to the copious amounts of telling the show will do later. After Mando acquires his target, he heads for Navarro to meet with Grief Karga, played by Carl Weathers. The conversation they share about different currency in the galaxy post the Empire I actually find really interesting. I don't love this show, but everything it does to expand the Star Wars universe, big and small, I actually really enjoy. So Mando is told of a special job which he sets out for, where he meets with the client. Mando is given the mission to hunt down a target and bring it alive. And here is where one of my few issues with this episode emerge. Mando is given this job, but there aren't any stakes. Why does he need to succeed? Why should I care if he fails? He just needs to get by? Okay, sure. But a few minutes earlier, we're told that there's still other jobs offered by the guild. He just wanted the highest paying one. So again, where are the stakes? Plus, in episode 3, we're told that dozens of other bounty hunters were sent after the target, yet he only meets a couple of them, one in this episode and a few in the beginning of the next one. And we'll talk about that later, but again, this episode lacks stakes. Nothing interesting happens if he fails, nothing interesting happens if he succeeds. Anyway, moving on. So Mando gets a fancy shoulder pad and has Vietnam flashbacks for some reason. I honestly don't know why this of all things triggers his PTSD, but whatever. So once Mando arrives on this planet, he's helped by Nick Nolte to locate the target's location. This is a little thing, but I really love this shot of Mando taking a sniper position on this cliff as the camera slowly reveals the enemy compound. Good stuff. So earlier in the episode, Mando wouldn't even get in a speeder with the droid, but now he's willing to work with and be friendly with one without any growth or buildup. Now yeah, Mando probably needed the help, but maybe have him realize that his only chance at winning this fight is to work with IG-11. Instead, he's shooting back to back with him 10 seconds after meeting the fucking droid. So yeah, after this pretty exciting shootout, we get the reveal of the child, and the episode ends with Mando showing his empathetic side. So yeah, episode review, I like it. I think this is a great first episode that properly establishes the main character, the setting, and the tone the rest of the show will follow. So let's see how episode 2 goes. Here we go. I don't have much to say on this episode, so I'll keep it brief. We pick up right after the end of episode 1 as Mando attempts to make his way back to the client, but he runs into some rival bounty hunters. I like this little fight. I especially like how Mando pushes the child out of harm's way. I think that's pretty cool. But I wish that these hunters showed up in the previous episode. Showing an immediate threat to Mando's mission would have added stakes to the episode and a sense of urgency for Mando to succeed. But here we are. So Mando's ship is stripped for parts by Jawas, he chases them, he gets fucked, has Nick Nolte help him, and then he agrees to get an egg for the Jawas in exchange for his parts. The Mudhorn fight is pretty fucking awesome, but the real spectacle here is the CGI. It's phenomenal. This fight also ends with the reveal of the child's force sensitivity, which is pretty cool. So after Mando gets his parts and he and Nick Nolte repair the ship, Mando is off with the child en route to the client. Episode review? It's pretty good, but it's ultimately unnecessary. I'm gonna bring this up later, but this season is like 50% filler bullshit. The only essential thing to happen this whole episode is the reveal of the child's force sensitivity. The rest just kind of happens. We learn nothing new about the world or the characters, so yeah, in the end, it's cool, but it doesn't matter. Next. I'm going to start this one off by saying that I love this episode. It's my favorite episode, hands down, so here we go. Mando arrives back in Navarro to deliver the child to the client, but immediately shows concern and care for the child as his morals start to corrupt him. I like how this episode does that too. The way Mando slowly starts to realize he wants to and he has to save the child. It's done largely through visuals and I really enjoy that. So after Mando gets his sexy new armor, he decides to rescue the child, and what follows is an excellently directed and shot extraction sequence. This right here highlights how effective Mando is at doing what he does. He doesn't hold back and he doesn't falter. He's focused and he's efficient. I love these angles in these shots too. This episode's director was Deborah Chow, and she definitely knew what she was doing, and this whole sequence makes me want her to direct a full-on action movie. She would excel at it. So Mando gets the child and makes his way to his ship to leave Navarro, but we get this scene straight out of John Wick, and I love it. So after a decent shootout where Mando's fellow Mandalorians bail him out, he sets off into the galaxy with the child, and Mando is now a wanted man. Episode review? It's pretty much perfect. The pacing is fantastic, all building to a climactic final battle with good dialogue and excellent direction from Deborah Chow. Everything this episode sets out to do, it does it very well. I don't even hesitate to call this my favorite episode. However, from this point on, the show really takes a dip that it just doesn't recover from. So let's get into that. This episode is completely useless, so let's get into it. We open on this village of people being terrorized by these raiders, which sets the stage for the conflict of this episode. After Mando and the child touch down, Mando meets and fights Cara Dune in a half-decent action sequence. The only problem I have with this fight is that it kind of undoes everything Deborah Chow did with Mando in the previous episode, because here, Mando gets his balls kicked in, and he pulls one of the dumbest moves I think I've ever seen. He activates his flamethrower like 10 seconds before aiming it at his target. Like, come on, man, really? Anyway, after this we learn of what happened to a rebel fighter after they beat the Empire, which is quite interesting in my opinion. Again, all of the world expansion things this show does, I think are great. I am a huge fan of that kind of stuff. So Mando is commissioned to save that village from the opening, and he enlists Cara Dune for help. Here we learn more about the Mandalorian Creed, but it's nothing new because we learned about it in the previous episodes, so again, this episode is non-essential. Also, I find some of Cara Dune's line delivery to be really weird, but Gina Carano is also very good in episodes 7 and 8, but it's here that some of her shit is just delivered awkwardly.
I mean fighters. Be realistic.
I've seen that thing take out entire companies of soldiers in a matter of minutes.
So you can slip off the helmet and settle down with that beautiful young widow and raise your kid sitting here sipping spotchka?
I don't know, maybe it's just me. So we get a decent fight scene and an okay final battle, ending with Mando planning to leave the child as he moves on, but their plan is thwarted by a bounty hunter, and I actually completely forgot about that plot line, because this episode has nothing to do with it. So the episode ends with Mando and the child leaving in search of safety elsewhere. Episode review? Pretty bad. This episode is fine on its own, I guess. There's nothing inherently wrong with it, except that I find it very generic and paint by numbers, but it serves no purpose in the grand scheme of things, as it's just a filler episode. I'll get more into this later, but this filler episode shit really pisses me off. Anyway, on to chapter 5. So like how episode 4 ended slightly tying into what episode 3 set up for us, episode 5 starts with another bounty hunter hot on Mando's tail, but Mando is kind of good at doing what he does again, so he kills this guy pretty much effortlessly. This episode isn't great, but something that's kind of mixed for me is its abundance of fan service. I kind of really enjoy seeing it, but I also think it plays its hand a little too heavily. We get everything from Tatooine to the Mos Eisley sequence to the Han Solo knockoff to mentions of Corellia and other references that I don't feel like listing. Then we get Tusken Raiders and shit. It's a fucking Easter egg palooza, which isn't really a bad thing, but there comes a point where it's just kind of annoying. Anyway, so Mando asks Princess Caroline to fix the ship and watch the child while he and the Gunslinger boy go hunt Fennec Shand, who apparently is this legendary assassin. I really like these shots of them on their speeders. It's pretty good. They find Melinda May and they bum rush her in a half-decent speeder action scene, but it ends with Mando staring her down and just getting blasted. Like, dude, really? So Mulan kicks the shit out of this prick before Mando gets her ass. Mando leaves to find transportation while Fennec convinces Toro to turn on Mando with great dialogue like,
"And they'll welcome you with open arms. Your name will be legendary."
So Toro blasts Fennec Shand and heads off to the final fight. We get more Oscar-worthy dialogue.
Bringing you in won't just make me a member of the guild. It'll make me legendary.
Before Mando smokes this guy. Anyway, this shit is over, thank God. Episode review, pretty bad. Worse than episode 4, but it's still not the worst episode. This episode is just completely worthless and does literally nothing for the overarching plot of Mando being hunted by the guild of assassins and bounty hunters. Wouldn't it have been better if Fennec was the one who was hunting Mando and she crash landed him on Tatooine, and the episode was her hunting him down while he and Amy Sedaris rushed to finish fixing the ship? Here, Mando could open up to the woman about his past, why he hates droids, why he feels the need to save the child. Wasted potential will always be worse than poor execution in my eyes, and that's why this episode, and this whole show really, just doesn't pass the vibe check. Anyway, let's move on to episode 6. Oh boy. Oh geez. Let me start by saying that this is the worst episode of the season. I truly despise this episode. So let's get into it. So just like the last 2 episodes, but even more so, this episode has nothing to do with the overarching narrative. At least episode 4 introduced Cara Dune, and episode 5 ended with the minor cliffhanger surrounding Fennec Shand, but this pile of shit episode has nothing. It is 100% through and through filler, and I hate that. In a good show that tells a season-long story, every episode should be essential to your narrative. Daredevil did this. The first season of Stranger Things did this. Dead to Me does this. It's just an integral part of storytelling in a show. Every episode needs to matter. You wouldn't watch a movie where 15 minutes of it isn't important. It happens, but it shouldn't happen, because that's not how you write and structure a story. Anyway, so this episode opens with Mando teaming up with a gang from his past, and we get all the cliche heist movie lines you could imagine. What's the job? Give me a reason why I shouldn't kill you where you stand.
Character references bad thing other character did in the past, which that character responds with,
I did what I had to do.
Ask him about the job on Alzok 3.
I did what I had to.
And then we have the inevitable double cross. And then we have the big reveal in the end that the traitor's plan was actually part of the other dude's plan. It's so fucking generic. I hate it. Because not only is it cliche and predictable, but it's boring. These characters suck. This episode sucks. I hate it. I don't want to talk about this, but I committed to it, and now I have to do it. Yes, the action set pieces in this episode are very good. This droid fight is fucking amazing, and this knife fight is flashy and fun, but this episode is all style and no substance. It's like a Zack Snyder movie. There's nothing interesting happening here. There's no long-running stakes or anything. Mando is betrayed by these guys who are here to free this prick that we've never met or heard of. We have no investment in this guy, but hey, whatever. That's great. So after Mando gets out, he takes everybody down. He returns to Beardy for payment. Beardy attempts to betray Mando, but Mando was counting on that because heist tropes. And Deborah Chow kills them all. We're done. Episode review? It's fucking terrible. This episode is so paint by numbers, so generic, so cliche, and so very, very boring. It gives me a headache trying to watch it. But even then, maybe I could bear it if it were important to the plot in any way, shape, or form, but it's just not. It's raw, unfiltered filler, and I hate that shit immensely. Every time someone tells me this is the best episode, I lose a year off my life. I can't stand how painfully boring, generic, and how useless it really is to the story being told here. Anyway, last 2 episodes, let's do it. Here we go, boys and girls, another absolutely banging episode from Deborah Chow. We open with the plot thread this season abandoned 3 episodes ago, as Mando and the child head off to the final confrontation, but realizing they're gonna need
a little help from some old friends.
Cara Dune reappears, and it's great seeing her again. I said before that aside from introducing her, episode 4 does nothing, and I stand by that, because if this was the first time we actually saw this character, it's fine, because she's fully detailed and introduced very swiftly, just to get everybody up to speed. Given by what she says and the context clues around her, we know that she's a former Rebel Alliance fighter, we can imply she and Mando are friends, and her combat skills are clearly on display, and they highlight how effective a fighter she really is. Anyway, so Cara Dune joins the party, and Nick Nolte and Korg show up again. The way these characters are all brought together and brought into the spotlight again is done really well, and I also love these transition shots with IG-11. Again, Deborah Chow is a god-tier director in this season, and should be the only person working on this show. Anyway, Mando and his team go back to Navarro, where Grief Karga is waiting for them. They venture across the land before chilling under the stars. We then get this really exciting horror-esque sequence that ends in my favorite joke in Disney Star Wars.
He's trying to eat me.
So after some twists and some turns, our heroes arrive to meet with the client. Now here's where the finale episodes kinda go to shit. We meet Moff Gideon. So here's the big baddie. We've never heard of him, we have no idea what his deal is, but he's here and he's supposed to be threatening. Okay, but why? I'll talk about this with the next episode, but here I want to talk about this speeder chase with Quill because it's awesome. The tension grows as Quill gets closer and closer to the Razor Crest, with the sound of the scout troopers getting closer and closer, until we get the slow reveal that Quill didn't make it and the troopers got the child. A solid ending to a solid episode. Episode review? I like this one. Deborah Chow's directing style just doesn't fail, as the only thing holding this episode back from being as good as 3 is Moff Gideon's appearance, and that's not on her, that's on writing. But I really like the pacing of this episode, as everything is building to a good cliffhanger and also building to the next episode being the season finale. So let's resolve that cliffhanger and get to that finale with episode 8. Our episode comes off the back of a tense and harrowing cliffhanger with a bad joke about stormtroopers sucking that goes on for way too long, and it's also too unfunny. Like, really? A cliffhanger ending where our heroes are in a real tight spot and it looks like curtains for everybody, and you open the next episode with a wacky little joke? Why? This reminded me that I was watching a Disney production. Anyway, so IG-11 kills these guys and he reclaims the child and he heads off to the final fight. But now we're going to talk about Moff Gideon because I said we would, so let's get into that. Moff Gideon shows up in the end of the season and he starts acting all threatening, but why? We don't know anything about him. He doesn't do anything to solidify himself as a threat. He's just Giancarlo Esposito, who should 100% be the MCU's Norman Osborn, talking menacingly with an army of stormtroopers at his side. Why should we fear this guy? I don't know. A better idea, in my opinion, would be to have Gideon be behind everything from the very beginning, so characters can hype him up like he's this big threat. And then, when he does show up, he can kill a Mandalorian or something effortlessly to really display how threatening and dangerous this guy is. But no, instead, he just shows up out of nowhere and he acts like a Bond villain. Great. I really like this flashback sequence though to Mando's past. It's so cool seeing the droids as these hulking metal monsters that were just slaughtering people, opposed to the goofy morons we saw them as in the Clone Wars. Next we get a fun little shootout, some good character moments, the child gets a moment, we see Pedro Pascal's beautiful face, and then we get the plot of season 2 laid out right for us. After some more character moments and a really good sacrifice from IG-11, Moff Gideon and Mando have a last confrontation. This shit with the jetpack is awesome. It's intense and it's exciting, and it's a really great set piece to end the episode with. Mando says goodbye to his friends, and he and the child set off for season 2, while Moff Gideon stands strong holding the Darksaber. And with that, season 1 of Disney Plus's The Mandalorian is over. Episode review? It's pretty good. This is a good conclusion to this season, and it puts season 2 in a pretty interesting position. There's some outstanding action set pieces this episode, and some really great and emotional character moments. All in all, not terrible. So all in all, The Mandalorian isn't that great. This show was given a story to tell, with Mando on the run with the child, but it loses interest in that narrative in favor of side stories completely unrelated to the bigger story at play. If Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni wanted this show to be an adventure by the week type of show, then they should have just done that. but instead, they made the conscious decision to introduce an overarching story about a bounty hunter carrying precious cargo through the galaxy with other hunters on his trail, but then they didn't commit to it and completely abandoned it. So what results is an 8-episode season to a show where only 4 episodes are essential, and that's just bad writing. Episode 1, 3, 7, and 8 are the only mandatory episodes to watch in order to follow the story of The Mandalorian. So the other 50% of this show is completely unnecessary and can be skipped. Jeez. Like I mentioned earlier, a good show makes each episode essential in order for the viewer to grasp the story at hand. Therefore, the show isn't wasting the time of the viewer with filler bullshit that won't matter in the long run. But that's what this show does. It wastes your time. I love Star Wars dearly. I really truly do. And I know most people who simp for this show also love Star Wars. But I think the reason people love this show is because they felt the mainline Skywalker saga films were letting them down. They felt like they got burnt on those. So seeing something new in a different corner of the Star Wars universe was exciting and fun. That feeling of bliss to experience something new blinded people to the flaws of this show. But in the words of Anakin Skywalker,
I don't have such weaknesses.
I don't hate this show, not by a long shot, but I do think it's important to call it out for its flaws instead of foaming at the mouth for it like a lunatic. Season 2 is handed out on a silver platter in episode 8. Mando now has to deliver the child to the Jedi. It's pretty simple, but I hope season 2 can keep its focus on a singular narrative and not get sidetracked with too many side quests the way season 1 did. So to wrap it all up, The Mandalorian is good, but it's far from the masterpiece most people seemingly claim it to be. It has flaws in its storytelling and struggles to keep its eye on the ball as it suffers from 50% of its first season being uninteresting filler episodes that sum up to an unnecessary waste. But when this show does focus on the bigger narrative at play, it is so fucking good. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you don't hate me for dissing your potential favorite show. I hope you have a fantastic day, and remember, this is the way.